Billionaire's daughter asks her father to take a homeless woman to Christmas dinner. What happens next is incredible. The snow fell softly outside the large stone mansion. Small white flakes danced in the air before joining the thick blanket that already covered the garden. Christmas lights twinkled in the windows, creating a colorful contrast against the dark night sky. It was Christmas Eve, a time that was supposed to be for joy and celebration. Inside the mansion, a fire crackled in the dining room fireplace, spreading a cozy warmth through the room. The dark oak table was impeccably set. Fine porcelain plates, polished silver cutlery and crystal glasses reflected the soft light of the candelabras. In the center, a huge golden turkey gave off a delicious aroma. Around it, platters of roasted potatoes, colorful vegetables, sauces and pies formed a feast fit for a king. Everything was perfect. Everything, except for the silence. James Thompson adjusted his red tie and looked at his wristwatch for the third time in 5 minutes. His thoughts were far away, on the meeting he would have with the shareholders right after the holiday. The numbers danced in his mind as his fingers drummed on the table. He had asked the housekeeper to serve dinner promptly at 7, but now he wished it would all be over soon. Across the long table, Lucy played with her embroidered napkin. Her blonde hair fell in curls over the shoulders of the green velvet dress her mother had chosen before leaving on a business trip. Her light eyes, the color of a summer sky, wandered around the luxurious room that, despite all its glitter, felt cold and empty. "Can we start, Daddy?" Lucy asked, her small voice almost swallowed by the size of the room. James looked at his daughter, as if he had only just noticed her presence. "Yes, of course," he replied, folding his napkin on his lap. "Mrs. Miller can serve now." The housekeeper appeared silently and began to serve dinner. The clatter of cutlery against the plates was the only sound that broke the uncomfortable silence between father and daughter. "How was your day at school before the holidays started?" James asked, making an effort that seemed mechanical. "It was good," Lucy replied, knowing her father wasn't really interested. "We made Christmas cards and sang carols." "That's nice," James said, turning his attention back to the phone that vibrated in his pocket. Lucy watched her father read the message with a furrowed brow. He always seemed worried, always had something more important to do. Christmas was just another day on the calendar for James Thompson, an inconvenient pause before getting back to what really mattered: work. The little girl sighed and turned her face to the window. That's when she saw her. A lone figure was walking slowly along the sidewalk in front of the mansion. It was a woman, huddled inside a coat far too thin for the freezing night. Her steps were unsteady in the snow, as if each movement required immense effort. The woman stopped for a moment, looking at the lit-up mansion. Even from a distance, Lucy could see the vapor of her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The woman seemed mesmerized by the lights, as if contemplating a world she would never have access to. There was something in her gaze, a mix of admiration and sadness, that made Lucy's heart ache. "Daddy," Lucy called, without taking her eyes off the window. "Look." James looked up from his phone, annoyed by the interruption. "What is it, Lucy?" "There's a lady outside, in the cold." James glanced quickly out the window and went back to cutting his turkey. "She must be going somewhere. Eat your dinner before it gets cold." But Lucy couldn't take her eyes off the woman. She had sat down on a snow-covered park bench, seemingly without the strength to go on. The girl felt a lump in her throat as she saw the woman rubbing her gloveless hands together, trying to warm them. Lucy looked at the bountiful table before her and then at her father, who was eating distractedly while replying to another message on his phone. "Daddy, we have so much food," Lucy said suddenly, her voice firmer than usual. James stopped with his fork in mid-air, surprised by his daughter's tone. "What did you say?" Lucy pointed to the window and then to the table filled with food that the two of them could never finish. "There's a lady outside, all alone in the cold. And we have enough food to feed 10 people. "Lucy, we don't know that person," James replied, going back to his meal. "We can't just invite strangers into our home." "But it's Christmas," Lucy insisted, her light eyes pleading. "Didn't Lord Jesus say we should help others?" "It's Lord Jesus can't, Lucy," James corrected, embarrassed. And yes, but we also need to be careful. We don't know who that person is. Lucy stood up from her chair, determined. She looks cold and hungry, Daddy, and Mrs. Miller is here. Nothing will happen. Lucy, sit down and finish your dinner, James ordered, his voice hardening. The girl looked out the window again. The woman had now huddled even more, hugging her own body as the snow began to fall more heavily. Can she have dinner with us? Lucy asked, her eyes fixed on her father's, challenging and pleading at the same time. James sighed, placing his napkin on the table. He was about to refuse again when something in his daughter's eyes made him hesitate. There was so much of her mother in those eyes, the same compassion, the same gentle stubbornness that had won him over years ago. Please, Daddy, Lucy insisted, her voice softening. It's Christmas. After a long moment of silence, James gave in. All right, I'll ask Mrs. Miller to invite her in. Lucy's face lit up with a smile that James hadn't seen in months. Thank you, Daddy, James called the housekeeper and asked her to go out to the sidewalk and invite the woman for dinner. Mrs. Miller looked surprised but nodded and went out. Lucy ran to the window, watching the housekeeper approach the woman with an umbrella. She saw the surprise on the stranger's face, the hesitation, and then the reluctant acceptance. Minutes later, the dining room door opened. The woman entered timidly, following Mrs. Miller. She seemed even smaller inside the imposing mansion. Her coat was damp with snow, and her worn-out shoes left small puddles on the marble floor. Her blonde hair, now dull, was tied in a messy bun, and her pale face showed signs of a beauty that time and hardship had worn away. Please, come in, James said formally, standing up. I'm James Thompson, and this is my daughter, Lucy. Helen, the woman replied in a low voice, almost inaudible. Helen Reed, I don't want to be a bother. It's no bother at all, exclaimed Lucy, running to her and taking her hand. The girl felt how cold it was. Come sit next to me. We have lots of yummy food. Helen looked at James as if asking for permission. He nodded, uncomfortable but resigned. You can leave your coat here, Lucy said, helping Helen take off the wet coat. We'll warm you up with some hot food. Mrs. Miller took the coat and brought a clean plate, cutlery and a glass for the unexpected guest. Lucy pulled a chair right next to her own and motioned for Helen to sit. Do you like turkey? Ours is really good, and the potatoes too, and there's pudding for dessert. Helen smiled shyly, her light eyes, the same shade as Lucy's, moist with emotion. I like everything, dear, thank you. James watched the interaction with a mix of discomfort and curiosity. The woman didn't seem dangerous, just broken, as if something inside her had shattered a long time ago. Mrs. Miller served Helen, who looked at the full plate as if it were a treasure. She picked up the fork with trembling hands and brought a small piece of turkey to her mouth, chewing slowly, as if she wanted to make the food last forever. Is it good? Lucy asked, watching Helen's every reaction. It's delicious, Helen replied, with a sincere smile. It's been a long time since I've eaten something this good. Do you live around here? Lucy asked, curious. Helen hesitated, glancing quickly at James before answering. I'm just passing through. Alone. On Christmas, Lucy seemed unable to believe it. Lucy, James intervened, feeling that his daughter was being nosy. Let Mrs. Reed eat in peace. It's all right, Helen said softly. It's nice to talk to someone. Lucy smiled, satisfied. Where are you going afterward? Again, Helen hesitated. I'm not sure yet. I'm looking for a place. On Christmas. Everywhere is closed, Lucy commented, worried. Helen just smiled and, without answering, she ate a little more, each forkful measured and savored as if it were her last. Do you have children? Lucy continued, ignoring her father's warning look. A shadow passed over Helen's face. No, dear, I don't have a family. Everybody has a family, Lucy insisted. Lucy, James warned again, more firmly. Sometimes life changes in ways we don't expect, Helen said simply, looking at her plate. Silence fell over the table again, but now it had a different weight. It was no longer the cold silence between a distant father and daughter, but a silence full of unasked questions and untold stories. James found himself watching Helen. There was a dignity about her, even in her clearly difficult situation. She ate with good manners, thanked Mrs. Miller every time she was served something, and answered Lucy's questions with kindness, even when they clearly made her uncomfortable. The dinner continued, with Lucy doing most of the talking, telling stories about her school, her friends, and her plans for Christmas. Helen listened attentively, as if every word from the girl was precious. James remained silent, torn between the discomfort of the unusual situation and a strange feeling that something important was happening that night. When everyone had finished eating and Mrs. Miller brought out the Christmas pudding, Helen's eyes lit up like a child's. "It's so beautiful," she murmured, looking at the dessert decorated with sugar holly. "It's the best part," Lucy exclaimed, excited. "Daddy always says it's too sweet, but I love it." James smiled sheepishly, realizing how well his daughter knew his habits and complaints. The pudding was served, and for the first time that night, a true celebratory mood hung over the table. Even James allowed himself to relax a little, watching Lucy chatter happily with Helen, who seemed more and more at ease. When the clock in the hall struck 9, Helen placed her napkin on the table and stood up. "I have to go," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. This was the most beautiful Christmas of my life." Lucy looked at her father, a silent plea in her eyes. James understood what his daughter wanted, but he shook his head slightly. He couldn't offer shelter to a stranger, no matter how harmless she seemed. "Do you have a place to go?" Lucy asked, concerned. Helen smiled, stroking the girl's face. "Don't you worry about me, dear. I always find a way." Mrs. Miller brought Helen's coat, now dry thanks to the laundry room heater. James, on an impulse he didn't understand himself, grabbed a wool scarf that was hanging in the hall closet. "Take this," he said, holding the scarf out to Helen. "It's very cold outside." Helen looked at the scarf as if it was something precious. "I can't accept." "Please," James insisted. It's Christmas." With trembling hands, Helen accepted the gift. "Thank you. I'll never forget this night." Lucy hugged Helen tightly as if she didn't want to let her go. "Are you going to be okay?" Helen kissed the top of the girl's head. "I will. Thanks to you, I'm stronger now." James walked Helen to the door, feeling strangely responsible for her. "Are you sure we can't call you a cab?" "It's not necessary," Helen replied. "It's not far from where I need to go." With a final thank you, Helen stepped out into the cold night. The snow had stopped falling, but the air remained freezing. James closed the door and went back to the dining room, where he found Lucy pressed against the window, watching Helen walk slowly away down the sidewalk, the new scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. "Is she going to be okay, Daddy?" Lucy asked, her small voice full of worry. James didn't know what to say. The truth was that Helen probably wouldn't be okay. Not on that freezing night, not alone on the streets. But how could he explain that to an 8-year-old child? "I hope so," he replied, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Lucy kept looking out the window until Helen's silhouette disappeared into the darkness. Her heart felt heavy, as if she had lost something important. "She seemed sad, didn't she?" Lucy commented, still looking at the spot where Helen had vanished. "Yes," James agreed, surprised by his daughter's perception. "But I think she was happy today, wasn't she?" "I think so, Lucy. I think you made her very happy today." Lucy finally turned away from the window and looked at her father. "We can make more people happy, you know, not just on Christmas." James looked at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. There was so much wisdom in those light eyes, so much kindness. When had she grown up so much? When had he stopped truly seeing her? "You're right," he said, hugging her. "We can make more people happy." That night, when James went to put Lucy to bed, the girl said a special prayer for Helen, and for the first time in a long time, James joined his daughter in her prayer. Outside, the snow began to fall softly again on the sleeping city. Somewhere in the dark streets, a woman walked with a new scarf, and a heart warmed for the first time in a long while. 3 days had passed since Christmas night. The snow continued to cover the city streets, now dirty and trampled on the busier sidewalks. The holiday was over, and life was returning to its normal pace. For James Thompson, that meant long hours at the office, endless meetings, and spreadsheets that seemed to multiply on his desk. Lucy was on vacation from school. With the housekeeper, Mrs. Miller, busy with post-holiday cleaning, the girl had more freedom to explore the area around the mansion. Her father left early and came back late, often when she was already asleep. The promises made on Christmas night, to be closer, to make other people happy, seemed to have been forgotten with the first work call. That Wednesday morning, the sky was clear and blue, a beautiful contrast with the white snow. Lucy finished her breakfast and asked Mrs. Miller for permission to play in the backyard. "Just don't go too far, Miss Lucy," the housekeeper warned as she collected the dishes, "and be back before lunch." "I promise," Lucy replied, already running to put on her red coat and snow boots. The Thompson mansion was in the city's most elegant neighborhood, but just a few blocks away began a commercial area with small shops, cafes, and a public park. Lucy enjoyed watching people come and go, each with their own story. Since Christmas night, however, her thoughts were fixed on one specific person, Helen. Lucy couldn't stop thinking about her. Where was she? Had she eaten today? Was she cold? The questions piled up in her young mind as she kicked at mounds of snow along the path. Without realizing it, Lucy strayed further than she was allowed. She reached the main street, with its decorated shops and hurried people carrying post-Christmas shopping bags. It was when she turned into an alley between a bakery and a clothing store that her heart leaped. There was Helen, her back to the street, leaning over a trash can. Her coat looked even thinner in the daylight, and the scarf James had given her was carefully wrapped around her neck. Her bare hands rummaged through plastic bags and cardboard boxes, pulling out leftover food that she placed in a paper bag. Lucy stood frozen for a moment, her little heart aching. The scene was so different from the image of Helen sitting at the dinner table on Christmas night, eating turkey and pudding with a fork and knife. "Size Helen," she called out softly, almost hoping it wasn't really her. The woman turned around quickly, startled, when she saw Lucy, her pale face flushed with shame. She hurriedly closed the paper bag and tried to hide it behind her back, like a child caught doing something wrong. "Lucy," she said, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here all alone?" "I live nearby," Lucy replied, approaching cautiously. "Are you looking for something?" Helen looked away, embarrassed. Just having a look. Sometimes people throw away things that are still good." Lucy looked at the bag partially hidden in Helen's hands. Through the opening, she could see a piece of bread and what looked like a bitten apple. "Are you hungry?" she asked directly, with the honesty of a child. Helen swallowed hard, unable to lie to those clear eyes staring at her with such innocence. "A little. But don't worry about me. You should go back home. Your family must be worried." "Mrs. Miller thinks I'm in the yard," Lucy answered with a pang of guilt. Then her face lit up with an idea. "Wait here. Don't leave. Promise?" Before Helen could answer, Lucy had already darted back the way she came. Helen stood in the alley, confused and slightly alarmed. She thought about leaving, about avoiding the embarrassment of being seen like this, so miserable. But there was something in Lucy's eyes, a mix of determination and kindness, that kept her there waiting. 20 minutes later, Lucy reappeared, breathless and with her cheeks rosy from the effort. In her hands, she carried a paper bag. "I got it!" she exclaimed triumphantly, holding the bag out to Helen. Helen took the bag hesitantly and peeked inside. There was a sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil, a perfect red apple, a package of cookies, and a small juice box. "Lucy," Helen began, lost for words. "I got it from the kitchen," Lucy explained, proud of her successful mission. "Mrs. Miller was on the phone, so she didn't see me. There's more at home. No one will miss it." Helen felt tears burn her eyes. "You shouldn't have done this. If your father finds out, he won't find out," Lucy assured her with the confidence of someone who knew her father's routine well. He's never home, anyway. There was a note of sadness in those last words that didn't escape Helen. She knelt to be at Lucy's height, holding the bag against her chest as if it were a treasure. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice choked with emotion. "You are a very special girl, Lucy." Lucy smiled, happy to be able to help. "There's a bench over there in the park. Can we eat together? It's not lunchtime yet." Helen hesitated, looking at her own dirty clothes and then at the well-dressed girl. "People will think it's strange." "I don't care what people think," Lucy replied with a surprising determination for her age. "Let's go." She took Helen's hand and gently pulled her toward the small park across the street. Helen let herself be led, surprised by the strength of that small, warm hand in hers. The park was nearly empty on that weekday morning. They found a bench that was relatively clear of snow, under a leafless oak tree. Lucy brushed the remaining snow off with her coat sleeve, and they both sat down. Helen carefully unwrapped the sandwich, as if she were unwrapping a precious jewel. It was simple, ham and cheese, but to her it felt like a banquet. She cut it in half and offered a piece to Lucy. "No, it's all yours," Lucy insisted. "I already had breakfast." Helen took a slow bite of the sandwich, savoring every piece. Lucy watched her with curiosity and a satisfaction that warmed her heart. "Did you sleep well after Christmas?" Lucy asked, swinging her legs that didn't reach the ground. Helen chewed and swallowed before answering. "Yes, I did," she lied, not wanting to worry the girl with the truth about the cold night she had spent in a crowded shelter. "And did you eat?" "Yes," Helen smiled slightly. "Not as well as at your house, but I ate." Lucy nodded, satisfied. "My dad asked about you, you know." Helen stopped mid-bite, surprised. "He did?" "Yes. He wanted to know if I thought you were happy to spend Christmas with us. I said yes, but that you seemed sad to have to leave." Helen didn't know what to say. The idea that James Thompson had thought about her after that night was unexpected. She continued eating in silence, as Lucy told her about the gifts she had received for Christmas and how the tree would stay up until New Year's. When Helen finished the sandwich, Lucy picked up the apple and polished it on her sleeve before handing it to her. "Do you really not have any family?" she asked suddenly, returning to the topic that had clearly intrigued her since Christmas dinner. Helen bit into the apple, buying time to decide how to answer. "I have some distant relatives, but we haven't spoken in a long time." "Why not?" Helen sighed. How could she explain to a child the complexities of adult life, the wrong choices, the relationships that fall apart, the pride that prevents reconciliation? "Sometimes people grow apart," she finally replied. "It's not always someone's fault. It just happens." Lucy thought about that for a moment. "Like my dad. He's always far away, as even when he's at home." The insightfulness of the observation caught Helen by surprise. "Your dad works a lot, doesn't he?" Lucy nodded, drawing patterns in the snow with the tip of her boot. "Mom does too. She's traveling for work. Again." "That must be hard," Helen commented with genuine empathy. "I have Mrs. Miller," Lucy said, shrugging as if she didn't care much. But Helen could see the sadness in her eyes. "And now I have you too. We're friends, aren't we?" The question, asked with such simplicity and hope, hit Helen like a wave. Friends. When was the last time someone had considered her a friend? When was the last time someone had looked at her with anything other than pity or contempt? "Yes," Helen replied, her voice almost breaking. "We're friends." Lucy beamed, a radiant smile that lit up her entire face. "Good. I've never had a grown-up friend before." Helen couldn't help but smile too, a genuine smile that hadn't appeared on her hardship-worn face in a long time. It was a smile that reached her eyes, softening the worry lines and bringing back a glimpse of the woman she used to be. "Can I come see you again tomorrow?" Lucy asked, excited at the prospect of her new friendship. "I can bring more food, and a book if you want. I have a lot of them." Helen knew she should say no. She knew it wasn't appropriate, that James would certainly not approve, that it was wrong to involve a child in her disorganized life, but Lucy's enthusiasm was contagious, and the loneliness of the past few months weighed too heavily. "So if you can come without getting into trouble," she replied cautiously. I don't want you to lie or sneak around. No one will notice, Lucy assured her with a confidence that broke Helen's heart. It was sad to think that a child was so sure her absence would go unnoticed. Lucy glanced at the digital watch on her wrist, a Christmas gift from her absent mother. I have to go. Mrs. Miller will be serving lunch soon. Helen nodded, finishing the apple and saving the cookies for later. Thank you for the snack, Lucy. It meant a lot to me. You're welcome, Lucy replied, standing up and adjusting her coat. Will you be here tomorrow at this same bench? Helen hesitated for only a second. I will. Lucy smiled and, in an impulsive move, hugged Helen. It was a quick hug, but full of warmth. See you tomorrow, then, and she ran off, her blonde hair bouncing under her wool hat, leaving small footprints in the snow. Helen sat on the bench for a long time after Lucy left, holding the paper bag to her chest. Friend. The word echoed in her mind like a forgotten song she suddenly remembered. The next day, Lucy showed up on time, this time with a picture book and a package of homemade cookies that Mrs. Miller had just baked. They sat on the same bench, and Lucy read the story aloud, while Helen listened intently, asking questions and making comments at just the right moments. On the third day, Lucy brought a small bouquet of flowers she had bought with her allowance from the corner flower shop. To brighten your day, she said, handing the colorful daisies to Helen. On the fourth day, it rained, and Lucy appeared with an umbrella far too large for her and a thermos of hot chocolate. They took shelter under the small roof of the park's gazebo, watching the rain fall as Lucy told her about her classmates and her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. And so, day after day, a routine was established. Lucy would sneak away from home for an hour, always with some small gift, a snack, a flower picked from the garden, a drawing she had made, or simply a new story to tell. James, immersed in his work, hardly noticed his daughter's outings. When he was home, he was usually on the phone or reviewing documents. Meals were quick and quiet, with Lucy answering nothing much when asked about her day. For Lucy, these daily meetings with Helen became the highlight of her vacation. In this unlikely friendship, she found the affection and attention she missed so much at home. Helen truly listened to her, asked questions about her stories, remembered the names of her classmates and her favorite stuffed rabbit. For Helen, these moments with Lucy were like rays of sunshine after a long winter. The girl brought life and purpose to her empty days. In the hours when she wasn't with Lucy, Helen found herself eagerly awaiting their next meeting, saving stories and observations to share. When Lucy came running down the park path, Helen's face would light up. Her smile, once rare, now came easily to her lips. Slowly, Helen began to feel human again, important, valuable, even if only in the eyes of a child. One afternoon, as they shared a package of cookies, Lucy asked, "You always seem happier when I'm here. That's a good thing, isn't it?" Helen stroked the girl's golden hair. "It's wonderful, Lucy. You have no idea how much these moments mean to me." "To me too," Lucy confessed, leaning her head on Helen's arm. "I like being with you. You really listen to me." At that moment, looking at the little girl beside her, Helen felt a determination grow within her. For Lucy, she had to try to get back on her feet. For this unexpected friendship, she had to fight for a better life. The winter continued to be harsh outside, but inside Helen's heart something was beginning to melt. January arrived with colder winds. Lucy's vacation was almost over, and soon she would be back to her school routine. For the past 2 weeks, her meetings with Helen had become the most important part of her days. She had learned Mrs. Miller's schedule and knew exactly when she could slip out unnoticed. On that Thursday morning, the sky was grey and heavy, promising more snow. Lucy was finishing her breakfast when James entered the kitchen, adjusting his tie. "Good morning, Lucy," he said, grabbing a cup of coffee. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," Lucy replied, watching her father check his messages on his phone before even sitting down. "I have an important meeting today," James commented, drinking his coffee quickly. "So don't wait up for me for dinner." Lucy nodded, already used to this kind of announcement. James gave a quick kiss to the top of her head and left, leaving behind only the scent of his expensive cologne. As soon as she finished breakfast, Lucy ran to her room. She took her piggy bank and pulled out a few bills. She had saved part of her allowance to buy a gift for Helen, a pair of wool gloves she had seen in a shop near the park. Helen always rubbed her hands when it was cold, and Lucy had noticed her fingers were red and chapped. Lucy waited for Mrs. Miller to start cleaning the upstairs before she left. She put on her warmest coat, tucked the money in her pocket, and grabbed a package of cookies from the pantry. Before leaving, she wrote a note saying she was going to play in the yard, leaving it on the kitchen table. The biting wind hit her face as soon as she opened the door. Lucy tightened the scarf around her neck and started walking toward the park. As she passed the small accessory shop, she stopped to buy the gloves. The saleswoman smiled as she saw the little girl carefully counting her bills. "They're for a gift," Lucy explained proudly as she received the bag with the gloves. "I'm sure they'll make someone very happy," the saleswoman replied. Lucy continued on her way to the park, eager to find Helen. In recent days, she had noticed that her friend seemed more tired than usual. She coughed sometimes, and her voice was hoarser. Lucy hoped the gloves would help keep her warmer. When she arrived at their usual meeting spot, Lucy was surprised not to see Helen sitting on the bench. She always arrived earlier and waited for Lucy, often with small stones or twigs that she turned into improvised toys to entertain the girl. Lucy looked around, searching. That's when she noticed a figure lying on a more distant bench, partially covered in snow. Her heart raced as she recognized Helen's coat. "Helen!" she shouted, running towards the bench. Helen was lying on her side, curled up as if trying to conserve heat. Her breathing was heavy and ragged. Lucy touched her face and recoiled in shock. She was burning with fever. "Helen, wake up!" Lucy called, shaking her gently. "Helen, please!" Helen slowly opened her eyes, their light blue now dull and unfocused. "Lucy!" she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I'm here," Lucy replied, holding her hand. It was ice-cold despite her burning face. "You're sick." Helen tried to sit up but was overcome by a coughing fit. Her whole body trembled, not just from the cold, but with the effort of breathing. "It's nothing," she said when she could speak. "I just need to rest a bit." Lucy looked around, desperate. The park was nearly empty due to the bad weather, and the few people who hurried by didn't even look in their direction. No one was going to help. "You need a doctor," Lucy insisted. Helen shook her head weakly. "I can't afford it. I'll be fine." Lucy knew that wasn't true. She remembered when she had pneumonia the year before. Her father had hired private nurses, and even then she had spent weeks recovering in her warm, comfortable bed. Helen had none of that. A decision formed in her mind. "You need to come with me." "Where to?" Helen asked, confused. "To my house," Lucy replied, determined. "There's medicine, hot food, and a bed there." Helen's eyes widened, alarmed despite the fever. "I can't go to your house, Lucy. Your father." "My father isn't home, and even if he were, he can't leave you out here sick." Lucy was already pulling Helen up to a sitting position. "Please, let's go." Helen was too weak to resist much. With effort, she managed to stand, leaning heavily on Lucy. The girl, despite her small size, stood her ground and held Helen by the waist. "It's just a few blocks," Lucy encouraged. "You can make it." The walk to the Thompson mansion, which Lucy usually covered in a few minutes, seemed endless. Helen staggered, stopping frequently to lean on lampposts or walls when the dizziness became unbearable. Lucy never let go of her hand, guiding her with a determination that was impressive for a child her age. When they finally reached the mansion's gate, Helen stopped. "Lucy, I can't." "Your father will be furious." "You could die out there," Lucy exclaimed, pulling her towards the service entrance at the back. "Come on, Mrs. Miller will help. She's nice." As they entered through the kitchen door, they were met by the shocked gaze of Mrs. Miller, who was preparing lunch. "Good heavens!" "What is this, Miss Lucy?" the housekeeper exclaimed, drying her hands on her apron. "It's my friend Helen. She's very sick," Lucy explained quickly. "I found her in the park. We need to help." Mrs. Miller approached cautiously. She was a middle-aged woman with a kind heart, though she strictly followed the house rules. She placed a hand on Helen's forehead and drew back, alarmed. She has a high fever, she confirmed, but we can't just... Please, Mrs. Miller, Lucy pleaded, her eyes filling with tears. She has nowhere to go. The housekeeper bit her lip, undecided. Your father will be home in a few hours. He has a dinner party at home tonight. Lucy turned pale. She had completely forgotten that today was the day of the business dinner her father had mentioned at the beginning of the week. He wouldn't be out, as he had said in the morning. That was about another day. Before they could decide what to do, they heard the front door open. James had come back early to review the details for the dinner. Mrs. Miller, he called from the entrance. Is Lucy home? Lucy looked at Helen, who seemed about to collapse, and then at Mrs. Miller in a panic. The housekeeper sighed. Sit her down here, she whispered, pointing to a kitchen chair. I'll talk to your father. But it was too late. James appeared at the kitchen doorway, holding some papers. Mrs. Miller, I want to review the menu for... His words died as he saw Helen sitting at the table, pale and trembling, with Lucy holding her hand. The shock on his face quickly turned to confusion and then to anger. What is going on in here? He asked, his tone sharp. Daddy? Lucy began, stepping forward. It's Helen. The lady who had dinner with us on Christmas back, remember, she's very sick. James looked at Helen as if he didn't recognize her for a moment. Her appearance was much worse than on Christmas night. Thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes and a face flushed with fever. Lucy, what were you thinking? James asked, his voice tense. Art, you can't just bring strangers home. She's not a stranger, Lucy protested. She's my friend. Friend? James frowned. What are you talking about? Helen tried to stand, leaning on the table. I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson. It wasn't my idea. I'll leave now. But as she tried to take a step, her legs gave way. James instinctively moved forward and caught her before she fell, feeling the heat of the fever radiating from her body. She could die if she stays out there, Daddy? Lucy shouted, tears now streaming freely down her face. Please, let her stay. Just until she's better, please. James looked at his daughter in shock. He had never seen her so desperate, so passionately determined. He looked again at Helen, who was trembling in his arms despite the fever's heat. A conflict raged within him. He had an important dinner in a few hours, guests arriving, deals to be closed. He couldn't have a sick stranger in his house. It was inappropriate, inconvenient, potentially dangerous. But the desperation in Lucy's eyes... Mrs. Miller, he finally called, his voice softer. Prepare the back guest room and call Dr. Peterson. Tell him it's an emergency. Lucy's face lit up. Really, Daddy? She can stay? James nodded, still holding Helen. Until she's better. With Mrs. Miller's help, James carried Helen to the guest room at the end of the hall, far from the area where the dinner would be held. Lucy followed behind, carrying Helen's small bag and the bag with the gloves she hadn't even had a chance to give her. The room, though the smallest in the house, was still luxurious compared to any place Helen had slept in recent months. A large bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, heavy curtains that blocked out the cold, and a private bathroom with a deep bathtub. Lucy, go to your room while we take care of Mrs. Reed, James instructed. But I want to help, Lucy protested. You've already helped, James replied firmly. Now we need the doctor to examine her. You can see her later. Reluctantly, Lucy left, but not before giving Helen one last worried look. Dr. Peterson arrived in less than half an hour. He examined Helen carefully while James waited in the hall, checking his watch every few minutes, thinking about the meeting he would have to reschedule and the dinner preparations. When the doctor came out of the room, his diagnosis was serious. Early-stage pneumonia, aggravated by malnutrition and prolonged exposure to the cold. He prescribed antibiotics, fever reducers, and absolute rest. She'll need constant care for at least a week, the doctor explained as he wrote the prescription. It's a serious infection. If she had waited another day or two, it could have been fatal. James swallowed hard, imagining what would have happened if Lucy hadn't found Helen that day. The thought was disturbing in a way he hadn't expected. Thank you, doctor, he said, walking him to the door. I'll have the prescriptions filled immediately. After the doctor left, James found Mrs. Miller in the hallway. "Cancel the dinner," he instructed. "Say I had a family emergency." The housekeeper nodded, surprised, but relieved. "Yes, sir. And what about our guest? See if we have the medicines the doctor prescribed. If not, have the driver pick them up from the pharmacy and prepare something light for her to eat. A soup, perhaps." "Yes, sir." "And clothes. She'll need something clean." James hesitated. "See if any of my ex-wives left anything behind that might fit." While Mrs. Miller took care of the arrangements, James went to Lucy's room. He found her sitting on the bed, hugging her stuffed rabbit, her eyes still red from crying. "Helen is going to be fine," he said, sitting down beside his daughter. "But she's very sick and needs to rest." Lucy nodded, relieved. "Can I stay with her?" "Not right now. She's sleeping." James studied his daughter's face. "Lucy, how do you know Helen?" Lucy bit her lip, hesitant. "After Christmas, I saw her in the park." "And you've been meeting with her regularly since then?" James couldn't hide the concern in his voice. Lucy nodded, looking away. "She's really nice, Daddy. She really listens to me. And she tells beautiful stories." James sighed, realizing how much he had missed by being so busy. His daughter had formed a friendship with a stranger because she felt lonely. The thought weighed heavily on his chest. "I'm not angry," he said, surprising himself with the truth of those words. "Sire, but it was dangerous, Lucy. You could have told me." "She's not dangerous," Lucy defended. "She just had bad luck." The simplicity of the explanation made James reflect. How many times had he passed people like Helen on the streets, assuming their situation was the result of bad choices or poor character? He had never considered the possibility of just bad luck. In the following hours, the mansion was transformed. Mrs. Miller prepared a chicken soup and set aside some clothes that James's ex-wife had left behind. Simple, but clean and warm. The driver brought the medicine, and Helen's fever began to gradually subside. When she woke up, she found herself in a warm room wearing a soft nightgown with the taste of soup still in her mouth. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. A soft knock on the door brought her back to reality. Lucy entered, carrying a vase with yellow daisies and a book. "Are you feeling better?" she asked, cautiously approaching the bed. Helen smiled weakly. "Oh, I am, thanks to you." Lucy placed the flowers on the bedside table and sat on the edge of the bed. "I brought my favorite book to read to you." For the next hour, Lucy read stories about magical horses and adventures in distant lands. Helen listened with a smile, interrupted occasionally by a cough, but visibly stronger than before. James watched from the half-open door, unnoticed by either of them. He saw how Lucy held Helen's hand as she read, how she paused to show the illustrations, how she laughed at the small jokes Helen made even in her weakened state. It was strange to see his daughter so at ease with someone who, to him, was practically a stranger. But there was something in the way they interacted, a genuine affection, a connection that went beyond simple kindness. When Lucy finished reading, Helen had already fallen asleep again. The girl carefully tucked the blanket over her and tiptoed out. James quickly stepped back so as not to be seen, but Lucy found him in the hallway. "She fell asleep," the girl reported, holding the book against her chest. "That's good," James replied. "Rest will help her get better." Lucy looked at her father with serious eyes. "Thank you for letting her stay, Daddy." James nodded, feeling a strange mix of emotions. "Let's have dinner, Mrs. Miller made your favorite macaroni and cheese." As they walked to the dining room, James glanced at the room where Helen was resting. Something had shifted in his perception. She was no longer just the woman from Christmas or an anonymous homeless person. She was someone his daughter cared about deeply. Someone who, despite all her hardships, had shown enough kindness to earn Lucy's trust. Someone with a story, with feelings, with dignity, even when everything else had been taken from her. And that, James realized with surprise, made all the difference. A week passed since the day Lucy brought Helen home. With proper care, medication, and regular meals, she improved every day. The fever was completely gone, and the cough, though still present, no longer left her breathless. The guest room came to life with the drawings Lucy made to cheer up her recovery. On the walls, colorful paper flowers. On the bedside table, children's books and small toys the girl insisted on sharing. It was as if a piece of Lucy's world had been transplanted into that space. James Ears, contrary to his own expectations, had rescheduled 2 important meetings to be able to follow the guest's recovery more closely. He told himself it was just to make sure everything went smoothly, that there were no complications. But the truth, which he was reluctant to admit, was that something about the situation intrigued him deeply. On that Thursday night, after putting Lucy to sleep, James went down to his office. There was work piled up, emails to answer, spreadsheets to review. But his thoughts kept returning to the woman now sleeping in the guest room. Who was she really? How had she ended up in that situation? The little he knew came from the enthusiastic stories Lucy told about their conversations in the park. James poured himself a finger of whiskey and sat in his leather armchair, looking at the lit fireplace. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. That's when he heard light footsteps in the hallway. Helen appeared at the office door, wearing a light blue robe over the borrowed pajamas. Her blonde hair, now clean and brushed, fell over her shoulders. She looked hesitant, as if unsure if she was welcome. "Sorry to bother you," she said, her voice still slightly hoarse. "Mrs. Miller said you were here." James stood up immediately. "You're not bothering me." "Please, come in. How are you feeling?" "Much better," Helen replied, timidly entering the office. "Dr. Peterson said the fever hasn't returned and my lungs are almost clear." "That's great," James said, gesturing to the armchair opposite his. "Would you like to sit? I can ask Mrs. Miller to bring some tea." Helen accepted the invitation, sitting on the edge of the armchair as if ready to stand at any sign that her presence was not wanted. "I don't need any tea, thank you. Actually, I came because—" She paused, gathering courage. "I feel I owe you an explanation. About me, about how I got into this situation." James placed his glass on the side table. "You don't owe me any explanations." "Yes, I do," Helen insisted, looking him directly in the eye for the first time. "You opened your home to me, twice, and you don't even know me." James nodded, realizing this moment was important to her. "I'm listening, then." Helen took a deep breath, looking at her own hands for a moment before she began. 2 years ago, I had a normal life, a house, a job as a store manager, a husband. She gave a sad smile. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable. Until I found out my husband had a gambling problem. James shifted in his armchair, sensing the story would not be easy. He hid the debts, took out loans in my name, used our credit cards without telling me. By the time I finally found out, we were drowning in debt. I tried to help him, insisted he seek treatment. Helen paused, the pain still visible on her face. He promised to change, but the promises only lasted a few days. After a big fight, he just left. He took what little money we had and left me with all the debts. James frowned, indignant. Wasn't he held legally responsible? I tried, Helen replied, shaking her head. But many of the debts were in my name, and hiring a lawyer costs money I didn't have. She continued, her voice firmer now, as if telling her story strengthened her in some way. At first, I thought I could handle it. I worked overtime, cut all possible expenses, but the creditors wouldn't stop calling. The collection letters arrived every day. I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate. Helen stared into the fire for a moment, lost in memories. My performance at work started to decline. I made mistakes, missed meetings. After 3 warnings, I was fired. Her eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. Without a salary, I couldn't keep up with the house payments. I tried to sell, but no one wants to buy a house with so many liens. The bank eventually foreclosed on the property. James listened in silence, his expression grim. I stayed in cheap hostels for a while. I looked for a job desperately, but with no fixed address and a ruined credit history, no one would give me a chance. Helen sighed. I tried staying with a cousin in another city, but she has 4 kids in a small apartment. There was no room. She straightened her shoulders, as if trying to maintain her dignity while sharing the hardest part. When the money ran out completely, I tried shelters, but they're always full, especially in the winter. Many nights there was no space, and so I ended up on the streets. The room fell silent for a long moment, only the crackling of the fire breaking the stillness. Helen looked at James, her light eyes reflecting the firelight. Life can turn upside down in just a few months, and when you're alone, the fall is so much harder. James remained silent, absorbing everything he had heard. Helen's story shook him deeply. It was so different from what he had imagined. No drugs, no mental health issues, no deliberate bad choices. Just a series of cruel circumstances, compounded by the lack of a support system. It could happen to anyone. It could happen to him if he didn't have the resources and connections he had. Helen interpreted his silence as discomfort. I understand if you want me to leave as soon as I'm fully recovered. I've already overstayed your hospitality. James looked up, meeting her gaze. There was no trace of self-pity in that woman, only a quiet dignity that he couldn't help but admire. No, he said finally, his voice softer than usual. You can stay as long as you need. What James didn't say, what he perhaps couldn't yet express, was that Helen's story had just changed something fundamental within him. In the days following Helen's revelation, something subtle began to change in the Thompson mansion. The heavy silence that used to dominate the rooms gave way to conversations during meals, occasional laughter, and the sound of light footsteps in the hallways. The house, once so empty, despite all the expensive furniture and art, seemed to be coming to life again. Helen grew stronger each day. She could now walk around the house without getting tired, helped Mrs. Miller with small tasks in the kitchen, and spent hours with Lucy, listening to her stories from school, which had started again the previous week. Dr. Peterson, on his last visit, had commented on her almost miraculous recovery and attributed the rapid progress not just to the medication, but to the welcoming environment. James Keek, for his part, remained immersed in his work, but now he made small concessions. He came home a little earlier, asked about Lucy's day during dinner, and half listened to the adventures his daughter recounted before bed. These were minimal changes, almost imperceptible to him, but Lucy noticed and cherished them like rare treasures. Her light eyes would sparkle every time her father showed up for dinner before 8 o'clock. On a particularly cold February night, as the snow fell silently outside, Helen found James in his office. Lucy had already been put to bed after a long story session and was fast asleep, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, a faint smile on her lips. James's office was a reflection of his personality, organized, elegant, and somewhat austere. Dark mahogany shelves held books on economics and management, paintings of somber landscapes decorated the walls, and the scent of leather and wood dominated the room. The only personal touch was a photograph of Lucy on his desk, taken a few years ago when she was still very young. Helen knocked softly on the half-open door. James was hunched over papers, his reading glasses balanced on the tip of his nose, his brow furrowed in concentration. The lamp's light cast shadows on his tired face, highlighting the lines that constant work had etched around his eyes. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "I just wanted to thank you for dinner tonight. It was very kind of you to include my favorite dish on the menu." James looked up, adjusting his glasses. "It was Lucy's idea, actually. She gave me a full questionnaire about your preferences." He smiled faintly. "My daughter can be quite thorough when she wants to be." "She's amazing," Helen agreed, remaining at the door, as if unsure whether to enter. She was wearing grey sweatpants and a light blue sweater, simple clothes, but they suited her, restoring some of the dignity the streets had stolen. James noticed her hesitation and gestured toward the brown leather armchair in front of his desk. "Please, come in." "I'm not doing anything that can't wait." Helen entered and sat down, smoothing the fabric of the borrowed pants, one of the many items Mrs. Miller had set aside for her. Her blonde hair, now shiny and healthy, was tied in a simple braid that highlighted the delicate contours of her face. The weeks of proper nutrition and rest had restored some of the beauty that life on the streets had obscured. "How are you feeling?" James asked, putting his papers aside. Much better. Dr. Peterson said I'm practically recovered. Helen paused, looking at her own hands. Her nails, once broken and dirty, were now clean and manicured. Soon I'll have no more excuses to stay. James studied her for a moment. In recent days, he had found himself thinking more and more about what would happen when Helen was fully recovered. The idea of sending her away, back to the streets, seemed unthinkable now. There was something about her presence that brought an unexpected harmony to the house. The way she talked with Mrs. Miller in the kitchen, how she patiently listened to Lucy's endless stories, how she treated every object in the house with an almost reverent care. "There's no rush," he finally said. "Lucy would love for you to stay longer." Helen smiled, her light eyes reflecting the soft lamplight. "She's a special child. She has a huge heart." "Yes," James agreed, pride evident in his voice. "Sometimes I wonder where all that compassion comes from. It certainly wasn't something I taught her." Helen hesitated, as if carefully considering her next words. Her fingers toyed with the hem of her sweater, a nervous gesture that did not go unnoticed by James. "Say children learn more from what they see than from what they hear," she finally said, her voice soft but firm. "What do you mean?" "Lucy watches everything. How you treat people, how you react to situations. She absorbs it like a sponge." Helen paused, choosing her words carefully. "And she also notices what's missing." James frowned, suddenly feeling defensive. He sat up straighter in his chair, placing his glasses on the desk. "Missing. Lucy has everything she needs." Helen held his gaze, firm yet gentle. There was no accusation in her eyes, just a quiet honesty that came from someone who no longer had anything to lose. "Your daughter misses you. What she needs isn't what's on the table, but your affection." The words hit James like a physical blow. He leaned back in his chair, an expression of surprise and then denial crossing his face. Silence settled in the office, heavy as the snow that continued to fall outside. "I work to give her everything," he finally said, his tone a mix of defense and justification. His fingers drummed on the desk, a nervous habit that appeared whenever he felt uncomfortable. "The best school, the best opportunities. Everything I do is for her." Helen nodded, understanding. "I know, and she knows it too, in a way." But what?" James prompted when she hesitated. Helen took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. The lamplight created soft shadows on her face, highlighting the seriousness in her eyes. "She doesn't need all of that. She needs you." The silence that followed was profound. James looked away, towards the window where snowflakes were falling softly against the dark glass. Helen's words echoed in his mind, uncomfortably true. He remembered the look on Lucy's face earlier that evening when he had come home in time for dinner, the initial surprise, followed by a joy that was almost painful to witness. "I'm not trying to criticize," Helen continued, her voice gentle. "It's just that I've spent a lot of time with Lucy these past few weeks. She talks about you all the time. About how smart you are, how you solve difficult problems at work, how everyone respects you." James looked back at her, surprised. "She says that?" "Yes. She's very proud of you." Helen smiled slightly, her eyes softening at the memory. "She told me about the time you solved a big problem at the company and how the president called you personally to thank you." Her eyes sparkled when she talked about it. James remembered that day. He had come home late, exhausted but satisfied, and had tried to tell Lucy about his success at breakfast the next morning. He never imagined she had paid so much attention, much less that she had treasured the story so dearly. "But when I ask about things you do together," Helen continued, "she gets quiet, or she tells me something that happened a long time ago, as if she guards those memories like rare treasures." James felt a lump form in his throat. Images flashed through his mind. A little Lucy sitting on his shoulders at the zoo, Lucy learning to ride a bike with him running alongside her, Lucy falling asleep in his lap as he read her stories. When had those things stopped happening? When had work started to swallow not just his days, but also his ability to be truly present? "After Sarah and I separated," he began, referring to his ex-wife. His voice sounded hoarse, almost foreign to his own ears. It was hard to balance everything. Work got more intense, and He stopped, realizing how weak it sounded. They were excuses, and he knew it. The divorce had been 3 years ago. Lucy was only 5 at the time, and now she was 8. 3 years in which he had gradually drifted away, trading moments with his daughter for hours at the office, believing he was doing what was best for her. "It's not too late," Helen said gently, leaning forward slightly. The light highlighted the golden strands in her blonde hair. "Lucy is still little. She still needs you so much." James nodded slowly, feeling a mix of shame and gratitude. Shame for needing a stranger to show him what should have been obvious. Gratitude that she had the courage to do it. "You know," Helen continued, looking at the photograph of Lucy on the desk, "when you lose everything like I did, you start to see what really matters. It's not the things, the houses, the jobs. It's the connections, the people who care about you, who notice when you're not there." She smiled sadly. "I didn't have anyone like that. Lucy has you." James felt the weight of those words. He had been so blessed, and yet he was squandering what truly mattered. "Thank you," he said simply, "for being honest with me. Sometimes we need a different mirror to truly see ourselves," Helen replied. "Lucy was that for me. She made me remember that I'm still a person, that I still have value. Maybe I can repay that by being that mirror for you." James looked at her with new eyes. She was no longer the fragile, sick woman Lucy had brought home. There was a strength in her, a wisdom born from adversity that he was beginning to respect deeply. "Tomorrow is Saturday," he said, making a sudden decision. He closed the work folder on his desk with a decisive motion. "I think I'll take Lucy to the museum. She's always wanted to see that new dinosaur exhibit." Helen's smile widened, lighting up her entire face. "She'll love that." The next morning, to the surprise of everyone in the house, James came down for breakfast even before Lucy. He was dressed casually, jeans and a navy blue sweater instead of his usual grey suit, and his phone remained off in his pocket. There was a different energy about him, a relaxed air that hadn't been seen in a long time. Mrs. Miller almost dropped the tray of toast when she saw him in the kitchen at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. "Mr. Thompson, are you all right?" "Perfectly fine, Mrs. Miller," he replied with a smile. "I just thought I'd have breakfast with my daughter today." When Lucy entered the kitchen, still in her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes, she stopped short upon seeing her father at the table. Her blonde hair was tousled, and her unicorn pajamas contrasted with the usual formality of the house. "Daddy? You didn't go to work." "It's Saturday," he replied, smiling and pulling out the chair next to his, "and I thought we could do something fun today. Maybe go to the museum to see those dinosaurs you mentioned." Lucy's eyes widened, first with surprise, then with pure joy. The transformation on her face was like the sun rising after a long night, slowly, then radiant, lighting up every corner. "Really? Just the two of us?" "Well, Helen can come too if she's feeling up to it," James offered, looking at Helen, who was just entering the kitchen, drawn by the sound of excited voices. "Oh no," Helen said quickly, exchanging a knowing look with James. "I think I'll help Mrs. Miller with some chores today. You two should go and have fun." Lucy ran to hug her father, her small arms barely fitting around his waist. "I'll get ready super fast." And she ran back to her room, her hurried steps echoing up the stairs. James looked at Helen with a grateful smile. She just nodded, her eyes conveying understanding. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Something had changed, and they both knew it was for the better. The museum was just the beginning. In the following weeks, James began to deliberately reorganize his schedule. He called his assistant and asked her to block his mornings until 9, so he could have breakfast with Lucy every day. He started coming home in time for dinner with her almost every night, declining meetings that went past 6 in the evening. On weekends, he planned activities, ice skating, movies, walks in the park when the weather permitted. Even a cupcake-making class that left the kitchen covered in flour and both of them laughing until their stomachs hurt. At first, it felt almost forced. He constantly checked the time, thought about unanswered emails, postponed meetings. His phone seemed to weigh heavily in his pocket, begging to be checked. But gradually something began to change. He discovered that he enjoyed hearing Lucy's stories about school, that he found her imitations of her teachers funny, that he was charmed by her unique perspective on the world. For the first time in years, he began to feel truly present, not just physically but with his full attention. Lucy blossomed with the attention. Her face lit up when her father came home. Her eyes sparkled when he sat down to listen to her day. She started saving little observations throughout the day. "I have to tell Daddy this," creating a mental list of things to share at meals. Even her teachers noticed the change, commenting on how much happier and more confident she seemed in recent weeks. On a particularly sunny Sunday, despite the lingering cold, James took Lucy and Helen to the park. The sky was a stunning blue, and the snow was beginning to melt in some spots, revealing green patches of grass that heralded the coming spring. As Lucy ran ahead, feeding the ducks in the partially frozen lake, Helen and James walked side by side. "She looks so happy," Helen commented, watching Lucy jump with joy as a particularly brave duck took bread right from her hand. The sound of her crystal-clear laughter echoed through the nearly empty park. "She is," James agreed, his eyes fixed on his daughter, "and so am I." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You know, I always thought I was sacrificing time with her for a greater good, securing her future. But I was missing her present." Helen smiled, pulling her scarf closer to her face to shield herself from the cold wind. It was the same scarf James had given her on Christmas night, now a symbol of the transformation in all their lives. The present is all we're ever truly guaranteed. "You made me see that," James said, his tone more serious. "Ty and I can never thank you enough." Helen shook her head, her light eyes reflecting the blue sky. "It wasn't me. It was Lucy. She's the mirror that reflects the best of you back to yourself." They watched in silence as Lucy ran toward them, her cheeks red with excitement and cold. "Daddy, Helen, come see. There's a duck with ducklings." James took his daughter's hand and let himself be led to the edge of the lake, where a family of ducks swam serenely. Helen followed a few steps behind, watching the father and daughter crouch down together, pointing and laughing, creating another memory they would both cherish. In that moment, Helen felt a happiness unlike anything she had experienced in recent years. It wasn't the joy of receiving something, but the deep satisfaction of having helped build something beautiful. Seeing James and Lucy reconnect, creating memories that would last forever, was worth more than any material comfort she could have. Somehow, amidst all her loss and suffering, she had found a purpose: to be the mirror that helped a father and daughter see each other again. And that, Helen thought as she watched James lift Lucy onto his shoulders so she could see better, was a gift no one could ever take from her. March arrived, bringing the first signs of spring. The snow began to melt, revealing shy shoots of grass in the gardens. The trees showed small green buds, and the sun, though still weak, lingered longer in the sky each day. On that Saturday morning, Helen was carefully packing her few belongings on the guest room bed. There weren't many, some clothes donated by Mrs. Miller, a notebook Lucy had given her, a small bottle of perfume James had bought for her birthday. Her hands passed gently over each item, organizing them in the small suitcase James had insisted on giving her. She was fully recovered now. Dr. Peterson had given her a clean bill of health the previous week, praising her extraordinary recovery. That meant it was time to leave. The thought made her stomach tighten. In the past weeks, the Thompson mansion had become more of a home than any place in recent years. But Helen knew she couldn't stay forever. She had already overstayed their hospitality. A light tap on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Can I come in?" Lucy's voice sounded from the other side. "Of course, dear," Helen replied, forcing a smile. Lucy entered, still in her pajamas. Her light eyes immediately noticed the suitcase on the bed. "Are you already packing your things?" she asked, sadness evident in her voice. Helen nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed and motioning for Lucy to join her. "Yes, I'm all better now, and I can't abuse your father's kindness forever." Lucy sat beside her, picking up one of the folded sweaters and stroking the soft fabric. "But where will you go?" "I'm not sure yet," she answered honestly. But I'll be okay. Lucy frowned, unconvinced. You could stay here. We have plenty of room. Helen smiled, touched by the simplicity with which children see the world. Your father has already done so much for me, Lucy. He doesn't mind, Lucy insisted. He likes you. He smiles more since you arrived. Helen felt a warmth rise in her face. It was true that her relationship with James had evolved in recent weeks, from suspicious strangers to something close to friends, but that didn't change the fact that it was time to move on. Another knock on the door interrupted their conversation. James appeared, already dressed in jeans and a casual sweater, his new Saturday uniform, so different from the impeccable suits he wore during the week. Good morning, he said, looking from his daughter to Helen. Am I interrupting something? We were talking about Helen leaving, Lucy answered directly, a slight accusatory tone in her voice. I said she could stay. James entered the room, leaning against the doorframe. His eyes met Helen's, a silent communication passing between them. Actually, he said, I wanted to talk to you about that, Helen. Do you have a minute? Lucy looked from one to the other, sensing that something important was about to happen. Can I stay? Why don't you go get dressed first? James suggested. Then we can all have breakfast together. Lucy hesitated but eventually nodded. She gave Helen a quick hug before leaving, whispering, Don't go without saying goodbye. When they were alone, Helen continued folding her clothes, more to have something to do with her hands than out of necessity. So, James began, walking over to the window. You've really decided to go today? Yes, I've overstayed your hospitality. James shook his head. You know that's not how I see things. Even so, Helen insisted, I need to move on, try to rebuild my life. And do you have a plan? The question was casual, but Helen could sense the underlying concern. A few ideas, she replied vaguely. Maybe look for work in shops or restaurants. James nodded thoughtfully. He seemed to be considering something, weighing options in his mind. I have a friend who owns a cafe, he said finally. In the city centre. Her name is Claire Donovan. We met in college and have kept in touch over the years. I spoke with her yesterday. Helen stopped folding her clothes, her full attention now on James. They need a waitress, he continued. Ours, the cafe, is growing, has a loyal clientele. Claire is a good person, a fair employer. If you're interested, I can recommend you. Helen felt as if the air had been knocked out of her lungs. A job, a real job, with someone James knew and trusted. It was more than she had dared to hope for. Her voice failed, and she cleared her throat to hide her emotion. I would be very interested. But are you sure your friend wouldn't mind? I mean, with my situation? James took a few steps toward her, his gaze firm and sincere. I told her about you. Not all the details, just enough. Claire isn't the type to judge people by their past, but by who they are now. And what I see is an intelligent, hard-working and loyal woman who deserves a second chance. His words struck her deeply. Was that how James saw her? Thank you, she finally said, her voice little more than a whisper. It's more than I could have ever imagined. James smiled. Great. Claire said you can start on Monday if you'd like. To get to know the place and see if you like it. The pay isn't much at first, but the tips are good. Helen nodded, still processing the information. A job, a new beginning. And as for housing, James continued, there's a small apartment above the cafe. It was used as a storage room, but Claire is willing to rent it out for an affordable price, if you're interested. It would need some work, but that would be perfect, Helen interrupted, unable to contain her emotion now. James, I don't know how to thank you. It's the least I can do, he said simply, after everything you've done for Lucy, for us. At that moment, Lucy reappeared at the door, already dressed and with her hair combed. Her eyes watched the scene with curiosity. What happened? She asked, sensing the emotional atmosphere in the room. James turned to his daughter with a smile. Helen got a job at Aunt Claire's cafe, and she's going to live in the apartment above the shop. Lucy's face lit up at the news. Really? Does that mean you're staying in the city? Can we still see each other? Helen opened her arms, and Lucy ran to hug her. Yes, dear, I'll be staying close by. The following Monday, Helen met Donovan's cafe. It was a cozy establishment with dark wooden tables, hanging plants in the windows, and the irresistible smell of freshly ground coffee and baking bread. Claire Donovan, an energetic woman in her early 40s, greeted her with a firm handshake and a genuine smile. "James spoke very highly of you," she said, leading Helen through the cafe. "He doesn't usually make recommendations, so I was curious." The apartment above the cafe was small but had potential. Fair main room that served as a living room and bedroom, a tiny kitchen and a simple bathroom. The walls needed painting, the floor a good polishing, but it had large windows that let in plenty of natural light. To Helen, who had slept on park benches and in overcrowded shelters, it looked like a palace. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Her body, still recovering from her illness, protested after long shifts on her feet. But there was a deep satisfaction in earning her own money, in being able to pay for her own needs. Claire was a demanding but fair boss, and the regular customers soon began to appreciate Helen's attentive service. With her first paycheck, she bought paint and supplies to renovate the apartment. On her days off, she painted the walls a soft shade of blue, cleaned and organized. James and Lucy showed up one Sunday to help, turning the work into a sort of party. Lucy painted small flowers on the kitchen baseboard, while James fixed a loose shelf and installed new curtains that Mrs. Miller had specially sewn for the apartment. Gradually, the place began to take on Helen's personality. Colorful cushions she found at a thrift store, borrowed books from the public library, a vase of daisies on the table, Lucy's favorite, always fresh. It was simple, but it was hers. As the weeks went by, Helen established a new routine. She worked at the cafe 6 days a week, saving every penny she could. On Sundays, her day off, she often visited the Thompson mansion for lunch with Lucy and James. She always brought small gifts, a special pastry from the cafe's bakery, an interesting flower she found on the way, a magazine with stories she knew Lucy would like. On a particularly busy afternoon at the cafe, nearly 2 months after she started working there, Helen was serving a group of customers when she saw a familiar figure walk through the door. Lucy, in her school uniform, was waving excitedly. James followed her, looking slightly out of place in his expensive suit in the cafe's unpretentious setting. "Say we came to visit you," Lucy announced as soon as Helen approached. "Daddy got off work early today." Helen smiled at James, noticing his slightly embarrassed air. "This is quite a surprise." "Lucy insisted," he explained, though his smile suggested it hadn't taken much persuasion. "She said we needed to see you in your natural habitat." Helen laughed, leading them to a table in the corner. "Claire will be happy to see you. She's always asking about you." As she served hot chocolate for Lucy and coffee for James, Helen felt a wave of gratitude. 2 months ago, she had been alone, sick and hopeless. Now she had a job, a home, and people who cared enough about her to make a surprise visit. Later, when Helen took them to see her small apartment, she felt a mix of pride and nervousness. It was simple, almost Spartan compared to the Thompson mansion, but she had achieved it through her own efforts. Lucy ran around the space, examining every detail with childlike enthusiasm. "I like the blue curtains. And look, Daddy, she hung up the drawing I made." James took it all in with a genuine smile. "It looks great, Helen. Cozy." "It was hard at first," she admitted, "after so long without a place of my own, but I'm getting used to it now." "We're proud of you," James said simply, his words carrying a weight that made Helen's eyes well up. In the months that followed, Helen discovered a new version of herself. The job at the cafe was thriving. Claire had even mentioned the possibility of promoting her to assistant manager. The small apartment had truly become her home, with little touches that reflected her reborn personality. And most importantly, Lucy and James's visits remained regular, a constant reminder that she was no longer alone in the world. On a sunny Sunday, almost 6 months after leaving the mansion, Helen was preparing a simple lunch for her usual visitors. As she chopped fresh vegetables for a salad, she heard the doorbell ring. Lucy ran in as soon as Helen opened the door, hugging her with her usual enthusiasm. "We brought dessert," she announced, holding up a box of pastries from Helen's favorite bakery. James followed, carrying a small potted plant. "For your table," he explained, handing it to Helen. As they ate lunch, talking and laughing like a family, Helen looked around at her small, clean and organized apartment, at Lucy chattering about school, at James watching her with a warm gaze. It was a simple life, but one filled with meaning. A life she had built with her own hands, thanks to the opportunity she had been given. And that, Helen thought as she served dessert, was more than enough. It was everything that truly mattered. A year had passed since the Christmas night when Lucy had spotted a stranger huddled in the snow. 12 months that had transformed 3 lives in ways none of them could have imagined. It was a Sunday in December, and snow was once again covering the city with its white blanket. Helen was tidying up her small apartment above the cafe where she now worked as an assistant manager. In recent months, her life had stabilized, work was going well, her home was simple but cozy, and Sunday lunches with James and Lucy had become a cherished tradition. The sound of the doorbell announced their arrival. Lucy entered first, her blonde hair sprinkled with snow, her cheeks rosy from the cold. "Happy almost Christmas," the girl exclaimed, hugging Helen tightly. James followed her, carrying a small pine tree. "We thought you needed a little Christmas spirit," he explained, placing the tree near the window. Lunch passed with the warm familiarity they had developed. Lucy told them about the Christmas play at school. James mentioned plans for the holiday, a short trip to a cabin in the mountains. "And you're coming with us, of course," he said to Helen, as if it were obvious. Helen felt a warmth spread through her chest. It had been so long since she had felt part of something like this, a family. After the meal, while James tidied up the kitchen, Lucy pulled Helen to the small sofa near the window. "I have something for you," the girl said, taking a folded piece of paper from her bag. Helen sat beside her, curious. Lucy seemed strangely solemn, her light eyes shining with anticipation. "Ads to celebrate," she explained, handing the paper to Helen. As she unfolded it, Helen felt her breath catch. It was a drawing made with colored pencils, showing 3 figures holding hands, Lucy in the middle, James on the right, and Helen on the left. Above them, in colorful letters, was written, "My family." "Do you like it?" Lucy asked. "The teacher asked us to draw our family and, well, you're part of it." Something overflowed inside Helen. All the emotions she had held back throughout the year, the gratitude, the affection, the disbelief at her luck, simply poured out. She held Lucy's small hands in hers, looking into the eyes of the child who had changed her life. "Lucy," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "you changed my life. You are a very special child. I will never forget what you did for me." Lucy smiled, that pure smile that lit up her entire face. "You changed our lives too. Daddy says you taught us what's really important." Helen glanced at James, who was watching the scene from the kitchen, his eyes also misty. He nodded slightly, confirming his daughter's words. "We're a family now, aren't we?" Lucy asked, with the direct simplicity of children. Helen couldn't answer with words. She just opened her arms, and Lucy threw herself into them. She hugged the girl tightly, tears now streaming freely down her face. James came closer, placing his hands on both their shoulders, completing the circle. Outside the window, the snowflakes continued to fall softly, just as they had on the night it all began. But now, instead of separation and loneliness, they brought the promise of warm days, regardless of the weather outside. More than a reunion of lost lives, a family of affection had been born, a bond that no hardship could break, a connection that went beyond blood or name, a living proof that, even on the coldest nights, compassion can light a fire capable of warming the